Welcome to the Unfolding Thought Podcast. My name is Eric Pratum. Today, I'm talking with Gini Dietrich, founder of Spin Sucks and the creator of the PESO Model, a framework for integrating paid, earned, shared, and owned media in a strategic, scalable way. Gini has worked across communications, PR, and marketing for decades, and her approach has shaped how many organizations, large and small, think about trust, influence, and reputation today. In our conversation, Gini and I talk about how to build a reputation you can stand on, how communications teams can drive measurable outcomes, and why the PESO model is so much more than just media coverage. We get into practical applications, the discipline of content creation, and how Gini has built community and influence around an honest, no BS approach. If you've ever struggled with the gap between what marketing says and what actually moves the needle, I hope this conversation will provide you with some clear things to take action on. And now, I bring you Gini Dietrich. Gini, thank you for joining me. It's nice to see you again after so long. Would you mind telling me a little about yourself?
It's so good to see you too. We were just talking pre-recording about how long it's been. It's been a while. It's very nice to see you too. And yes, I'm Gini Dietrich. I run an organization called Spin Sucks, which actually started as a blog for my agency, which at the time was Arment Dietrich. The blog then became a book and then became a community and has become its own media property where we now do licensing, training, and implementation of the PESO model.
Tell me about the PESO model.
Sure. It's, for those that don't know, it's an acronym that stands for Paid, Earned, Shared, and Owned Media. And, it came about because in my agency, we did very traditional PR. We did media relations, events, reputation management, crisis kinds of stuff. And we were in a spot where we were doing really well with media relations. I mean, we were getting like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times. We were on the cover of both Wall Street Journal and the LA Times at once. And for clients, and we were doing a really good job from a PR perspective. But when you do that, you have some highs and lows, right? Like if there's an event or there's big news or a new product launch or a new campaign or something like that, you have lots of media hits. And then when nothing's going on, you have the lull. And during the lull, of course, you're still working, you're still building relationships with journalists, you're staying top of mind, all those kinds of things. But I learned that clients don't like to pay for the lulls. They don't like to pay for the things that you have to do to make sure that you can get the highs. And this all happened at the same time as like Twitter launching, LinkedIn launching, Facebook becoming available to businesses. Inbound marketing was becoming a thing. Blogging was becoming a thing. And so we were looking at it to kind of understand, are these things that we can incorporate into our business, into the things that we do for clients so that we have more consistent output and more consistent results? And so we were doing all of this stuff. And when I wrote Spin Sucks, the book, I talked about this. I talked about how we were taking all of that. And my publisher, after the first draft, came back and said, this process that you're talking about here is really interesting. What do you call it? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, let's give it a name. So we went back and forth and we'll probably talk about this later, but I believe that if you're going to do the media types in order, it would be OSEP or OESP. But you can see that I have to actually think about that, right? And so she said, well, can we do PESO? I think that makes more sense. It's easier to remember. Number one rule of branding, all those kinds of things. And I was like, well, there's a currency called that. Can we do it? And so we went through the whole copyright thing to include it in the book. And we discovered that we could call it that. And then she came back and she's like, great, now can you create a graphic to go with it? And I was like, oh my word, can we just write the stupid book? Like, okay. So we created a graphic, and it's funny to look at the very first graphic that was published in the book compared to today, because you can tell we rushed it. It was just like we had to get something in the book and just like, right. And it's evolved significantly in the last 11 years, but that's how it sort of came to iteration. Is we were trying to figure out how to fill those valleys so that we had more consistent results for clients, and introducing paid, owned, and shared media into those kinds of activities.
So did you say that now your primary focus is training people in PESO rather than running PR or any
Yeah.
other forms of marketing. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the business is completely flipped. I'd say it started during the pandemic because we found, as you well know, that everybody was trying to figure out how to stay afloat and how to, completely shift their businesses to new models. And so it started to shift a little bit where we were doing more training on the framework. And then literally last year, which was 10 years, so it literally took 10 years for overnight success, it exploded. And now we're doing licensing, training, and implementation inside Fortune 10 companies. I mean, it just overnight.
Do you know, I remember when I was involved with Microsoft at a fairly high level, but from the outside, we were working on social media for Windows, Bing, Office, Xbox, etc. This was pre-2010.
Yeah.
Around that time, social media was still so new in so many
Yes.
ways. And
Yes.
I would argue that social media remained new in some sense through maybe 2015 or something, depending on how you want to cut things.
Yeah.
It was still a long time. And so at that time, there are plenty of people who are arguing that you can't really do social media well, quote unquote, unless you're inside an organization. And I kind of use that as an example, let's say, because you are not acting as your client's agent, but it sounds to me like for your clients, and I'm guessing some or maybe plenty of your clients are freelancers, agency people, whatever. But whether that's a correct assumption or not, you're also, I suspect, training the marketers within the brands. And so, do you have a perspective about certain types of marketing or communications that are better handled, or certain roles or channels inside an organization versus being the potential for someone on the outside to work in those areas?
It depends. All of the clients that we have on the brand side have agencies. And so we're not a threat to them. We're not doing the work that they do. We're teaching the marketers the framework, and it's very scientific. So there's a very scientific way that you go through it, and understand it and learn it and implement it. So the marketers, and in many cases, there's 2,000 marketers, so it's not a small thing. But what we're finding is that as a communicator by trade, I wanted comms people to own this, and we're finding that that's not the case at all, that the marketers are owning it. And in fact, for every one of our clients, we don't work with the comms teams at all. And it's disappointing for me and a couple of people on my leadership team as well, because we all have comms expertise, but we're finding that the marketers are the ones that are using it. And then what they're doing is when they do briefs for their agencies, they're saying, okay, here are the things that you need to be thinking about from a PESO model perspective. So ad agency, you need to be doing this, this, and this. Content, you need to do this. Social, you need to do this. So they're still bringing their agencies in to do the work, but they're directing and managing agencies differently because of it.
Given the way that you described the PESO model, and then, what you just said, I appreciated actually the answer that you gave, because the description sounded to me of the PESO model like we're looking more for consistency and or sustainability in our marketing and communications. And that to me suggested strategy in some respects. And I don't even know at the moment that strategy is necessarily the right word, as much as to say, when I go to my agency, to say, I'm looking for these things in the grander scheme, in the bigger picture. And so, yes, a campaign or whatever it is will have certain marks that it needs to hit or goals that it needs to fulfill upon. But hopefully, any of the email or the PR or whatever it is that we do will also serve mission, vision, values
That's right.
sorts of things. And so it's not just direct response, for example.
Right. Yeah. So consistency, sustainability are definitely two. We find that in most organizations, exactly what you're saying, tactics run in parallel with one another, and they're not integrated. And one of the things the PESO model framework teaches you is how to integrate that. So yeah, the marketers get to the point where they expect their agencies to work together, which is not an easy undertaking. Like we've helped some of our clients build internal integrated agency teams that bring together team leads from each of the agencies to work together. And you can imagine that there's some, fiefdom protection and things like that. So it is a bit of breaking down silos, and it's a bit of change management. But what we find is that because most organizations run those tactics in parallel, something like this will happen. So there's a great example of Samsung a couple of years ago did a Super Bowl ad, and people were like, "This is fantastic. This phone looks amazing." And so the ad did its job, right? Like it created visibility, it created interest. People went to the website, and the phone could not be found on the website. So then they went to social, and the phone couldn't be found on social. There was no integration. So the ad agency and the paid media team internally did a really good job. They did what they were supposed to do, but they didn't talk to anybody else. So they didn't know the ad was running. So it didn't get on the website. It wasn't talked about in social. There was no content. There was no media relations. And so it fell flat because of that. And it's, you would think, oh, well, that doesn't happen. It happens all the time. And so that's one of the things that we do is we really go in and we kind of integrate ourselves with the teams, and we're like, everyone needs to talk together.
Yeah, I mean, even just thinking of something like I've done a lot of, not in recent years, but in the past, a lot of conversion rate optimization. And when you optimize a landing page, every little thing that's not driving towards a conversion more than likely is distracting from it. And
Yeah.
so if my goal is only to generate a lead or a donation or whatever it is, adding that phone number where potentially there's no call tracking metrics or something
Right.
just distracts from my goals. And yet, as far as the organization is concerned, they probably don't care where the lead or the donation comes from.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think they're getting to the point of caring. And I think we're beginning to enter an era of, what we have found in the last few years, I would say in the last 5, is that much of the work was activity based. So, and that's what they were reporting up is we did this and we did this and we did this and we had a landing page and, like all of this stuff. And executives were okay with that. Well, now we're entering an era where they're like, well, wait a second. I want all of these things individually to convert. So how are you doing that? And for God's sakes, if you're going to run a Super Bowl ad and we're going to spend that much money, that hand better be talking to the other hand so that everything else is optimized to be able to sell. Because if the Super Bowl ad does what it's supposed to do, which it did, but they can't buy it, that's a huge problem, right? And I think we're beginning to enter that era. And I think AI is to not necessarily blame, but I think AI is the cause of that, where execs are going, now you have an opportunity to really have AI help you understand the data and make sure that that all of this stuff is doing what you need it to do.
That's interesting. I suspect that it will be valuable to come back around to AI. I wanted to ask you though, you mentioned your book. I think you've written 2 books, haven't you?
I have.
Yes. So the second book was Marketing in the Round, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, it was the first. If it's FinSex was the second, but yeah, publishing wise, yeah.
In Marketing in the Round, I believe I recall that you pushed pretty hard against organizational silos. And it sounds to
Look at
me
you. I'm
like,
impressed.
thank you. I read a lot of books and a lot of them are audio, but I take notes.
I love it. I love
I
it.
still have notes
That's
from
amazing.
your book.
That's amazing.
I think that some of what you're saying here talks to the value of breaking down organizational silos. And, we're always going to have roles and responsibilities and so on. But I guess what has been your experience the more that you've shifted towards training, big and small businesses? Are you seeing that either the PESO model is helping or that there are cultural shifts that are breaking down silos? Or do you think that remains as much of a challenge as maybe it was 10 or 15 years ago?
I think it's actually more of a challenge now than it was back then. And, when I co-authored Marketing in the Round, and when Jeff and I wrote it, I think we were both really naive on what that meant. I mean, yes, organizations should not have silos, but if you go back and read it now, you're like, especially with another 13 years of experience, you're kind of like, oh, I can see, but that's probably not the right way to do it. Experience is wisdom, of course. But I think what we find is that when things are crazy externally, as the world feels like it's on fire right now and it's chaotic, people tend to kind of get paranoid and hold on to things more versus collaborating. So I actually think the organizational silos are worse today than they were back then. But we find that two things have to happen. The first is there has to be a dedication from the top to implementing something like this, because it is change management. You are requiring that teams talk to one another, that the agencies talk to one another. So that has to come from the top. But there also has to be a massive buy-in from the middle, because they're the ones doing the work, right? And if you don't have buy-in from them, you can talk with the C-suite until you're blue in the face about how this needs to happen and what needs to happen, and you can put them through training. But 3 months from now, they're not going to remember any of that, and they're going to go back to doing what they've always done, what they've always been successful doing, no matter what the C-suite's saying. So we find that it's really important to get buy-in from the top to make sure that it's sort of an edict, but then work really well with the middle, with the people who are doing the work, to ensure that it's not just a 3-month thing, that it actually becomes embedded in their workflows and that it's the first thing that they think about. So that's hard work. It's not an overnight thing, right? It's probably a 3 to 5 year thing, not a 6-month thing.
What is or has been your experience with trying to make sure that there's an endorsement from the top and that the middle is bought in? My guess would be that some of this, adopting the PESO model and actually executing upon it or taking that ethos, in some places it's successful and in other places it's not. But I suspect you have also found that you have trained an organization well, and 1 or 50 of their people really get it, but then a year or 2 later, it didn't go anywhere. So you said you work really hard on some of these things, which I imagine has that kind of thought process or focus has built over time. But are you having to integrate some sort of like change management or alignment work into the training that you're doing?
Yeah, and I think we sort of fell into that on accident. And as I was looking at the work that my team was doing with some of our clients, I realized that was a big gap. And so I made a couple of really big hires this year to help us with that. One strategy person who's really good at the change management piece, and then a learning person who can take what we've done and almost scale it differently so that it's effective with adult learners. Up until that point, up until hiring her, it was very much like live training. It was recorded videos. It was that kind of stuff. And what she's helping us do now is actually embedding the work into the workflows that exist versus asking them to spend an hour or 2 on additional training or professional development every week. And that's been a huge shift. I mean, like the way that she thinks about that has been huge. So I think it's a little bit of change management, and it's a little bit of sort of shifting the way that you are working to help organizations understand it, so that, again, it's not, to your point, it's not 50 people who get it and a year later it's not being implemented anymore, but it's actually becoming part of their process. So for one client, we've included it in how they do their annual planning, and we've included it in how they do their quarterly assessments. So they have an actual checklist that they have to go through to say, have we done this? Have we done this? And if not, how are we going to implement these things? And that's how they're graded on now. So it's taken a while to get there, but embedding it into those workflows, I think will be far more effective.
That's interesting. And for what it's worth, I am working on a project right now where a client has they have a presenting problem. They want to produce these kinds of documents better, faster. They want to produce twice as many with the same
Sure.
number of staff or,
Yep.
things of that nature. And so their identified prescription was AI. Can we use AI to do these things better, faster, more scalably, and so on? And I've said to them numerous times that I really don't think the thing that we built for them, this AI tool essentially, is the thing that they're going to need in 6 or 12 months or the thing that they will be getting a lot of value out of in 6 or 12 months. I think that the ultimate outcome or the benefit that they're going to get from this project is that some of their people now have an actual use case with AI. Think back to the early days of Twitter or something. You would go and talk to your friends and say, Twitter's really cool. And they'd say, I've heard of it on CNN or whatever, but I just don't know why I would use it.
Yep.
And we have a similar thing, not just our parents, but
Yes.
in the workplace. I've heard of AI, but I don't know why I would use it. And so I have, again, said to them explicitly, I feel like giving them a specific use case and not making it painful just lowers the barrier to entry for many of these people. And what you'll likely find in 6 or 12 months is that they started using it in the one area where we made it easy. And then some people will try, well, what about the next thing? What about the next use case?
That's
And
right.
so on,
That's right.
such that in 12 months, hopefully, you have a handful of people who will actually use AI, but outside of this narrow initial scope. And it kind of sounds to me like there are some similar aspects. Like, let's just embed this right into what you already do so that it's not an appendage or an add-on.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you're telling the story, and I'm thinking back to the early days of social media. And we had one client who wanted to figure out how to use social internally for the business, but do it from a comms perspective. I think customer service was using it already a little bit, but how could they do it from a communications perspective? And we were having a really hard time getting adoption. And I remember being in the chief communicator's office in San Diego, and I was sitting in his office, and he was like, well, how do you think we could do this? And he and I concocted this idea that we would create almost a working group, and we asked for volunteers. But we didn't ask for volunteers just from the comms department. We asked for volunteers across the company to be part of this working group. And we got about 10 people involved. And then we gave them responsibility for one aspect of social media. And what happened was, as early adopters, their peers started to go, oh, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And how are you doing that? And so you had this core group of people that started with it and became really successful, and then were lauded in company meetings and in town halls and things like that. So they were getting recognition, and their peers got a little jealous and wanted the same kind of recognition. And then they all started to get involved. So it became, and that actually happened pretty fast, using that sort of ad hoc or beta group of people that then expanded probably within 6 months, 6 to 9 months, I would say.
I, in recent years, have worked a lot with futurists that sort of academic study of it rather than the tech utopians.
Yeah.
They study our relationship with the future, which we all have a relationship with the future, because if you drop that drink there that you just had, then you have an idea of what's going to happen in the next split second, right? You also have visions of the future of what it's going to be like in this summer with your children, or where you would like your business to go in a year, and so on. And futurology or future studies, futurism, is on the academic side of things and coming out of the Rand Corporation and so on, the study of our relationship with the future. And I share all of that because there is an idea that runs through a lot of philosophy and religious texts and many other things, that you have to have an inspiring vision of the future in order for people to gather around a shared purpose. And it sounds to me like that's a bit of what is accomplished when I look over at my colleagues and I'm able to think, that could be me, or here's a place that we might go, rather than,
Yeah.
you have like a carrot and a stick sort of thing
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the stick where you're just afraid of what might happen. You're not going to adopt AI. You're not going to adopt social media if you're just afraid that you might not hit your numbers this year.
I've never thought about it from that perspective, but you're absolutely right. Fascinating. Huh. I'm writing this down. You got my wheels turning now.
Well, thank you. And this alludes to, I think, a little bit of, I think your phrasing was something like, it feels like the world is on fire right now. And I
Yes.
wanted to ask you about that, essentially, even coming into this conversation. So now is a time of great change. Of course, we can always look back into the past and say there was a lot changing. We're living the change right now, though.
Right.
So big or small in the grand scheme of things, it sure feels big right now. And in times of great change, in particular, I think you said you're working with some Fortune 10s. They're probably being impacted by economic uncertainty or tariffs.
Executive orders. Yep.
Exactly. And, just 6 or 8 years ago, or even during the pandemic, they were being hit by social change and by the pandemic and labor shortages and so on. But today, you know, when we have very clear economic impacts uh, because of executive orders and tariffs and so on, this is a time when a lot of organizations cut back
Yep.
on marketing and communications. Now, I suspect that you and I would say some version of now's the time to invest.
Sure. But no one does. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, what are you telling people, whether it's through your training or just generally, I guess, what are you telling people about marketing and communications given today's environment?
I think the answer to that is twofold, because the organizations that are more sophisticated, the organizations that have 2,500 marketers, they're more sophisticated, obviously, and they've invested in marketing and communications, right? So they understand that if they stop marketing, then the pipeline dries up. So I think it's a different conversation there than it is with like a B2B manufacturing organization or a commoditized business, that their business is drying up, their pipeline is drying up, and they just can't afford it. And to your point, people make money, people make emotional decisions about money versus logical ones. So we can say until we're blue in the face that if you stop marketing, your pipeline is going to dry up. And they may know that logically, but they're also looking at their P&L, and marketing and communications is easy. It's an expensive thing to just take right off, right? And get rid of it. We're also finding that most agencies are struggling right now because of all of this, and their clients are being affected by tariffs and executive orders and all the things, right? So I actually have some content that I'm producing or creating right now on the topic that I'll publish in a few weeks, but it's really, although now is not the time to reap the rewards of a tree that you planted, because you had to have planted the tree 10 years ago, right? If you didn't plant that tree 10 years ago, if you haven't been marketing for 10 years and maybe you stopped during the pandemic, so you've been only marketing for 2 or 3, right? The next best time to plant your trees now. So while it's painful and revenue may be down and all of those things, really think about how you're going to plant that tree so that in 10 years, you're ready for what's next. Because I think we have all lived through all of the experiences that it's cyclical and it used to happen every decade. Now it's happening every couple of years. So how are you going to be prepared for 2 years from now, 4 years from now, and 10 years from now? And it's to plant that tree now. So I say that to agency owners. I say that to clients that are, a little less sophisticated in their marketing efforts, whether or not it resonates. But I think that people can look back and go, yeah, you're right. If I had planted that tree 10 years ago, I'd be bearing the fruit now. And I could weather this storm a lot more differently. So that's my advice always is let's get that tree planted now so that, when we have another crisis 2 years from now, you're ready.
It sure sounds to me like you're hinting at was it in Good to Great where Jim Collins talks about the flywheel?
Oh, yeah.
It kind of sounds to me like you're talking about something like that, where you put in the effort and it pays back dividends. And when the market is difficult or there's change or whatever, that's the time when you can take energy out
That's
of
right.
the flywheel. But if that flywheel isn't spinning,
That's right.
is now the time that you really want to start putting in the effort while you already don't have the energy or the resources.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, you mentioned AI, and I did want to make sure that we spend at least a little bit of time on that. I think you can take it from a number of perspectives, from developing software to replacing jobs or any number of things. But broadly, how do you see AI playing into business or marketing and communications or even the PESO model at the moment?
Oh my gosh, there's so many applications.
Oh, yeah.
I love it, and it sounds like you do too. I think it has made us significantly more productive. And just from a personal perspective, I used to procrastinate a lot. I don't procrastinate anymore. I don't because it gets me started, right? It at least gets me something on paper that I can then start to formulate something. And I on night before last, I was kind of surfing social media, doom scrolling a little bit. I decided I couldn't read the news anymore. And so I opened my laptop back up. It was probably 8:15 and I pounded out a blog post, which I would not normally be able to do at 8:15 at night because I'm way more productive in the morning. But because I had already had AI sort of create the outline for me, it just flew right through my fingertips, which didn't happen 3 years ago, right? So from a personal perspective, it's fantastic. I also have been testing an AI clone of myself and I got it. It's not quite ready for prime time, but it's really close. And then I was looking at it and I was like, holy cow, this is scary because anyone can take video of you from YouTube, throw it into the AI and have it create a clone of you and then tell it what they want it to say. And it'll make it, you can't tell. It looks like you, it sounds like you, it has the same mannerisms as you. And all of a sudden you're like, I didn't say that. It's really scary. It's very cool, but it's also very scary. And I think we're at a crossroads right now where we have to decide, what do we do with this? Because, I think everybody, when you could cookie visitors and you could follow them through their customer journey and now we can provide ads, we can serve up ads based on interest, right? Which from a marketing perspective, I freaking love. I remember people were like, oh, but this is so dangerous and my privacy and my data. We are so beyond that now. People can literally take a video of you, a 2 minutes video. That's it. And it will create an AI clone of you and it will make it sound like you have supported all of the craziness that's going on in the world, even if you don't. So I think philosophically, we're at a cliff where it could start to be really dangerous. I had a friend post on social just a couple of days ago, what happens if we have AI bots that are the House of Congress and they take all of the data It's interesting, right? You think about it. They take all of the data from their constituents and they say, okay, 90% of my constituents want this. So, or of our constituents want this. So they create legislation on that. You still have human oversight of people who've been elected to make sure that it's correct. But how does that change? How does that change the world? I think we're there. I think that that's what's going to happen. So there's a big philosophical thing that we have to think about while we're also making ourselves far more productive and not procrastinating our work.
That's interesting. You're reminding me, I was just talking with someone yesterday about, so gosh, what was it? 20, 30 years ago, you could call 411 to get
Yeah.
information.
Yes.
And Google made their own version. I think it was 1-800-GOOG 411.
Was it? I don't remember.
Yeah, you used to have to pay whatever it was, a quarter or something would be billed to your landline or something, when you were calling it 411. But Goog
Yeah.
411 was free. And what it turned out that Google was doing, and then they did this with Google Voice at the same time, was they were recording all of the conversations and using that to optimize
Sure.
not just the data of the information of the response, but also to optimize the voice responses and to, train on the way that you or I would speak and ask questions. And now there are companies that, I think the company's called Teleperformance, that makes software for call centers. And they have a software that removes the accent of whoever the call center worker is.
No.
And now this was this was sort of talked about over the last few months in the media as like, quote unquote, whitening or Americanizing largely Indian, workers' accents. I think there's an argument that could have been made if they had been in front of it to say, this improves communication, because like I got my master's in German and I have a terrible American accent in German. It's really hard for people to understand me. I just never worked on my accent. So if I sounded like a native German, it would be a heck of a lot easier for people to understand me. But, we could talk about positive or negative implications or spin on this. But it seems clear to me that where they're going is that they will be recording every single call and they are processing on the fly what someone is saying. And then in 6 or 12 months, they're going to say, well, we know how people talk and we have all the information because we have millions of minutes of calls. So now you don't need any of those people.
Right.
And it seems like in so many places that there should be a lot of opportunity, but also with all of the uncertainty, it creates, what do they call it? VUCA, right? Volatility, uncertainty, change. And I forget what the A is, but that's the time we live in.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you think about, certainly there has been lots of change in the centuries of the world, right? The horse turned into the car, which lost jobs. I remember reading a couple of years ago an article about how self-driving cars are going to reduce things like organ donors because there's going to be far less accidents. And then, so what do people do if you can't get an organ? The implications of that are, while you want to be there to be less accidents, there's also life-saving that goes on because of it, right? And so there's all these implications, I think, of all of this stuff. And that never has changed. I think what's changed is the speed that it's coming at us. This has happened so much faster than anything else in our lifetimes that has happened. And social media came fast. The iPhone came fast. This is even faster. And so it's really, I think you're right. People will figure it out and people will find new ways. I think we're in this world right now where customer service, the more repetitive jobs, things like that, will be replaced. I just read an article that said that probably in our industry, you don't need a junior professional because AI can do a better job than somebody fresh out of college. So what do those kids do? They still have to learn the job. So what are we going to teach them so that they can advance their careers if they're not doing what the AI is doing now.
Well, I suppose bringing a little bit of this back around to some of the work that you're doing today, because I also want to do justice to making sure that people know where to find you and all of that. Do you think that, and I'm not trying to make an ad for you or the PESO model here, but it seems to me like if the PESO model might be utilized or championed more from a strategy level, like maybe there's a place for the PESO model alongside other, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but strategy sort of frameworks or education. And so maybe I'm looking to hire someone who's junior, but in a year from now, I'm looking to hire not a junior ad manager or junior copywriter as much as I'm looking for the right personality and skill set
That's right.
for someone to be able to execute or lead things that would utilize efforts that would utilize the PESO model.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we're looking at is exactly that. And it's advancing the thinking a lot more quickly than I think we anticipated, which is great. I love it. But a few months ago, we launched the PESO Model GPT just to kind of test out what that might look like and how the industry wide could use something like that to dictate the way that they build their plans, but still need the strategic oversight of the human. Like you can't use the GPT and say, create me a PESO model plan, and it does it effectively. Can you say, I'm thinking about doing this, this, and this. Strategically, we need to do this, and these are the goals we need to meet. How would you create the plan? Yeah, absolutely. But you have to have the business objectives. You have to have the ideal customer profile. You have to have your brand guidelines. You have to have the strategy. You have to have your KPIs. You have to have all of that to input it in order to do that. So I think you're right. I think we're in a place like that. And going back to the young professionals, we have kids about the same age. And I remember when we were looking at schools, and what we were interviewing schools around Chicago, because that's the way they do things here. And I remember sitting in informational after informational after informational session with all of these schools, and every single one of them, so this was 13 years ago, 14 years ago, every single one of them said, we have no idea what jobs will be available for these kids when they graduate from high school, and certainly no idea what jobs will be available when they graduate from college. So we're focused on building the most well-rounded human being that can go out into the world and make a change no matter what job's available. And I think that that's what young professionals have to think about now is, do I need to understand how to prompt AI? Do I need to understand how to edit the output? Do I need to have a basic enough knowledge to be able to know that this is kind of crappy, but I can make it better? Yes. Do I do even better if I'm making change for the world around me? For sure. And I think that that's how, somebody fresh out of college or with 5 or less years of experience is going to be more effective in their roles than saying, I can write a news release.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, we only have a few more minutes before I have to send you off to a meeting because you have a very busy schedule. So I said I want to do justice to, why people reach out to you, where they should connect with you. You mentioned having a blog and so on. So first and foremost, I want to ask, who should think about or who should look into the PESO model? And then second, how do people find you, connect with you, subscribe to your blog or anything else?
The PESO model, this may come across as snotty. I believe because of the way it has evolved and the way that it's working and because of the science that's behind it and the research that's gone into it, I believe that anybody who's not using it in the next few years between that and AI won't have a job. I don't think AI is going to replace you if you keep up. But any marketer or communicator who wants to evolve their skills or do more, understand more than just what they're an expert in, understand how paid, shared, and owned integrate into the work that you're doing with Earned, for instance, that it is the place that you should get that information. and then use that to understand how you can sort of orchestrate your symphony of AI robots, because I think that's where the future is going for sure. And then spinsucks.com. That's easy.
Is that the place that people go to, find whatever outlet they prefer? Some people like the email newsletter, social media, or whatever else. That's the central location.
That's everything. We have everything there. YouTube, all our social, the blog, the newsletter, everything. It's all there.
Awesome. Well, I suppose before I let you go, Gini, are there any last parting words of wisdom or things that you want to make sure to leave people with?
Yes. And I think we've both touched on this. We're in an interesting time right now, both industry-wide and in the country, in the world. And it's scary. It's scary, but I think that if you embrace what's happening, especially with AI, and you learn how to use it, and you made the point earlier that, if you just test it out, you'll find that there's another iteration and another iteration and another reason to use it. I had somebody join our team earlier this year and he was scared of it. And I said, just use it for something personal. And so he was doing his baseball, fantasy baseball. And so he created what he would normally do. And then he threw it into ChatGPT to see what it said. And it came up with a couple of trades that he hadn't thought of. And so he was like, all right, you're right. This is kind of cool. So play with it personally, embrace it from that perspective, because I do think we're at a cliff where we have to figure out ethically the right ways to use it, but you want to be part of that conversation. You don't want to be left behind. And I think AI will replace you if you don't embrace it, but it's not going to replace you just because it's AI.
I totally agree with you. Well, Gini, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And, I wish we had 3 times this amount of time.
Oh my gosh, me too. We could keep going forever.
So I hope that anyone who listens to this enjoys it. And thank you again for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hey, thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. And please share it with someone you know who'd appreciate this kind of information. If you want to bring this kind of thinking to your own business, check out mine at inboundandagile.com. We specialize in helping leaders with challenges around marketing, communications, and leadership so they can inspire real action in their people and audiences. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll come back for future episodes.